I'm the kind of cliche you read about in airport novels. The billionaire heir hiding from a family straight out of Succession, pretending to be a nobody. I found myself an Ice Queen CEO for a contract wife, took a side gig as a DoorDash driver, and was basically just coasting. My whole plan was to live a blissfully simple life, run out the 3-year clock, and then collect my divorce papers and walk away. But then the one that got away and her new lapdog boyfriend kept showing up to cause trouble. My mother-in-law, who despised me, never missed a chance to tell me I was worthless. Even my own wife, in name only of course, was convinced I was a lost cause. They were all just waiting for the punchline, for me to get kicked to the curb with nothing. My goal was simple: keep my head down, keep my cover, and make it to the finish line. Anyone who got in the way of that peace was about to get a serious reality check. What's that? My wife's company is in trouble? Fine. I guess I can help her out. Consider it an advance on her severance package. Ethan, it's 9 o'clock. Are you going to make breakfast, or are you waiting for my daughter to come home and serve you? My mother-in-law Sharon's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through the quiet of the morning. I was squatting on the balcony, carefully watering the collection of succulents Claire insisted on keeping, and didn't bother looking up. Morning, Sharon. Claire texted last night. Said she had an early meeting at the office. She's grabbing something on the way. Grabbing something on the way? Does that mean you can't cook for the rest of us? Your father-in-law, and I don't need to eat? You useless man. What good are you for besides taking up space? I stopped watering and let out a slow breath. 3 years ago, to escape a dynastic merger my family had cooked up, I, Ethan Hayes, the sole heir to the Hayes family fortune, signed an agreement, faked an identity as an orphan, and slipped out of New York City. The terms were simple. For 3 years, I had to make it on my own, without touching a single dollar of family money. To find a place to land, and to have a cover story for the family's occasional check-ins, I went through a broker and signed a contract with Claire Sterling, a woman who desperately needed a husband to get her own family off her back about getting married. She provided the roof over my head and $5,000 a month for living expenses. In return, I played the part of her husband, which mostly meant grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, and dealing with her pretentious mother. When the 3 years were up, I'd walk away with nothing, and she'd give me a $50,000 severance package. It was the perfect setup, a place to live, food to eat, and none of the backstabbing corporate warfare I'd grown up with. I spent my days riding my electric scooter around Austin, delivering tacos and barbecue, just coasting. It was heaven. The only downside was that in this house, I was less a person and more a piece of inconvenient furniture. My mother-in-law, Sharon, split her time between playing bridge with her friends and cataloging my failures. My father-in-law, Bob, was a bit better, but the look in his eyes was always a mixture of pity and disappointment. As for Claire, my wife in name only, she was a classic workaholic, as beautiful and approachable as a glacier. In the 2 years we'd been married, I doubt we'd exchanged 100 sentences. We shared a roof, but we were like two strangers who just happened to know each other's names. She probably considered marrying a loser like me the biggest stain on her otherwise perfect life. I stood up, dusted the dirt from my hands, and walked into the kitchen. Sharon was still going on in the living room, rattling off how someone's son-in-law had just bought his mother-in-law a new Lexus, while another had just leased a BMW. I pulled eggs and bread from the fridge. Whatever. A guy's got to eat. A little verbal abuse was a small price to pay for a quiet life. I had just put the plates on the table when the front door opened. Claire was home. She wore a tailored business suit that made her look even taller and more commanding than usual. But she looked worn out, a deep exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes. Claire, I thought you were eating out, I said, moving to take the designer handbag from her. She flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and pulled away before I could touch it. The distance between us was a physical thing. Meeting got canceled. Her voice was like the rest of her, cool and detached. The moment she saw her daughter, Sharon's face transformed. Oh, my darling girl, you look terrible. Did that Ethan do something to upset you again? Honey, I'm telling you, you need to get rid of this man, just divorce him and... Mom, Claire cut her off, a sharp edge of impatience in her voice. It's work. She walked to the dining table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Without a single glance in my direction, she picked up her fork and began silently pushing the scrambled eggs around her plate. I didn't say anything. I just went back to the kitchen and poured her a glass of water. I knew it wasn't just about work. Last night, on my way home from a delivery run, I'd passed the park near our building and seen her. She was sitting alone on a bench, her shadow stretched long and lonely under the lamplight. Not far away stood a couple. I recognized the guy, Brandon Vance. Knew him from UT. He'd been chasing Claire since their college days. The woman with him, Ava Chun, was someone I knew from my old life. She was the one that got away. I didn't know what they were talking about, but I saw Ava wrap her arm around Brandon's, her smile bright and triumphant. And Claire just sat there alone for a long, long time. I didn't go over. The most important rule of a contract marriage is to know your place. Her world wasn't mine to enter. Ethan, Claire said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Are you free today? I froze. It was the first time in 2 years she'd ever asked about my schedule. Yeah, what's up? I need you to drive me to the project site out west this afternoon. Okay, I said, not asking any more questions. Sharon, however, couldn't resist. The construction site? What's he going to do there? Haul lumber? Claire, honey, you can't rely on him for anything. If he had any ambition, he wouldn't be spending his days in that tacky red DoorDash jacket. I was, in fact, still wearing my work polo. Sharon's words were nasty, but I was used to it. Claire put down her fork and stood. I'm tired. I'm going to lie down. Be downstairs at 2. With that, she walked to her room and closed the door with a soft but definitive click, shutting us all out. I looked at her barely touched plate. I wasn't bothered. I knew she didn't really want me to accompany her. She just needed a driver. And I happened to be the cheapest one she knew, the one who required no explanation. At 2 o'clock, I was waiting downstairs. Claire was already in the passenger seat of her white Porsche. I opened the driver's side door and slid in. She handed me the keys without a word, her gaze fixed on the world outside her window. The car smelled faintly of her perfume. Cool, elegant, and distant, just like her. The Riverwood Estates project, she said. I started the engine and pulled smoothly out of the garage. Riverwood Estates was the biggest project her company, Sterling Innovations, had ever undertaken. A high-end, residential development. I'd heard Sharon complain about it enough to know that Claire had poured nearly every cent she had into it. Halfway there, Claire's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, answered, and put it on speaker. A man's cheerful voice filled the car. Claire, where are you at? Ava and I are already here, waiting for you at the sales office. It was Brandon. Claire's voice was flat. On the way. Be there in 30. No rush, we'll wait. Oh, forgot to tell you. My family's company is handling the commercial development next to Riverwood. Looks like we're going to be partners. We'll have to get closer, you know. The smugness in his tone was unmistakable. Right, Claire said, and ended the call. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She looked even paler than she had this morning. Clearly, she hadn't known Vance Development was involved. The silence in the car grew heavier. She wasn't talking, and I wasn't about to start a conversation. My job was to drive. 30 minutes later, I parked in front of the Riverwood Estates sales office. Even before we got out, I could see them standing by the entrance. A perfect couple. He was tall and handsome in an expensive suit. She was delicate and pretty in a white sundress. Brandon and Ava. They spotted the Porsche and walked over, their faces plastered with smiles. Brandon eagerly reached for the passenger door handle, but then he saw me get out of the driver's seat. He stopped short. Ethan, his brow furrowed. What are you doing here? Ava's expression was a complicated mask. She shot me a look, then quickly averted her eyes, as if I were something she'd scraped off her shoe. I ignored Brandon and walked around to open the back door for Claire, who had moved to the back seat for appearances. Claire got out and gave Brandon a curt nod. Claire, why is he driving you? He's a delivery guy. Can he even handle a car like this? You don't want him scratching it, Brandon said, his voice dripping with contempt. Claire glanced at me, then said coolly, he's my husband. The word hit them like a physical blow. The smiles vanished from their faces. Brandon looked like he'd just been told the funniest joke in the world. Husband? Claire, are you serious? You married him. Ava's eyes, however, were locked on me. They were filled with shock, confusion, and something else. A flicker of disdain I couldn't quite place. That's right. 2 years now. I answered for Claire, casually sliding my arm around her waist. Her body went rigid, but she didn't push me away. She knew that, right now, we had to play the part of a happy couple. I could feel how tense and slender she was. Her skin was cool to the touch, like marble. No way. Brandon's voice shot up an octave. Claire, how could you marry a loser like this? What does he even do besides deliver takeout? What could he possibly give you? What he can give me is none of your business, mister. Vance, Claire's voice turned to ice. We're here to see the project, not to catch up. She slipped from my grasp and strode into the sales office. I followed, feeling two pairs of eyes burning into my back. The sales office was opulent, with a massive scale model of the development in the center. A middle-aged man who looked like a project manager saw Claire and hurried over. Ms. Sterling, good to see you. Mr. Wallace, how's the project coming along? Everything's on schedule, it's just. Wallace hesitated, glancing at Brandon, who had just walked in. Brandon stepped forward with a grin, clapping Wallace on the shoulder. Go on, Wally, you can speak freely. We're all family here. Let me introduce you. This is Ava, my fiancée. And he pointed at me. And this is Ethan, Claire's driver. He deliberately swapped husband for driver. The insult was loud and clear. Ava gave Mr. Wallace a sweet smile, but her eyes kept drifting toward me, filled with a condescending, judgmental light. It was a look that said, see, the girl you can never get is mine now, and you're still the same broke nobody you always were. I almost laughed. She would never know the truth. It wasn't that I couldn't get her. It was that before I ever got the chance to ask her out, I got a call from my old man summoning me back to New York to deal with some family disaster. By the time I got back, she was with someone else. Just as well. Saved me the trouble. Mr. Wallace was no fool. He sensed the bizarre tension in the air and cleared his throat. Ms. Sterling, Mr. Vance, why don't we continue this in the conference room? Claire nodded and followed him. As Brandon passed me, he deliberately slammed his shoulder into mine. Stay away from her, loser, he muttered. You don't deserve her. I didn't move. I didn't even look at him. I was done with childish pissing contests like that years ago. But the way he looked at Claire, that raw, possessive hunger, it rubbed me the wrong way. Because no matter what our contract said, she was in name my wife. And I don't let other people touch my things without asking my permission first. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Mr. Wallace started a presentation, and I found a chair in the corner and started scrolling through my phone, making myself invisible. After a few minutes, I got the gist of it. The problem was the commercial plot next to Riverwood. Claire's company had planned to develop it themselves, but a cash flow problem had put it on hold. Now, Vance Development had swooped in and bought it. So, Ms. Sterling, Vance Development's proposal is a commercial tie-in, Mr. Wallace said, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. They'll handle the retail leasing and management, but they're demanding that all Riverwood homeowners are automatically enrolled in their retail membership program. And they want to take 20% of the HOA fees as a management fee. It was highway robbery. Claire's face hardened. Mr. Wallace, have you read this contract? How could you even bring this to me? Ms. Sterling, Wallace stammered. Claire, don't give Wally a hard time, Brandon said, leaning back his chair with the confidence of a man holding all the cards. Those are my terms. You know the kind of pull Vance Development has. We can bring a ton of foot traffic to the retail space, which will be a huge boost for your property values at Riverwood. It's a win-win. A win-win? It looks more like you're trying to bleed my company dry, Claire said, her voice dangerously quiet. That's one way to put it, Brandon shrugged. Business is business. Besides, I'm doing you a favor. I know you've sunk everything into this project, and that cash is tight. You agree to my terms, and I can convince my dad to throw in another $5 million in investment capital. He paused, his eyes fixed on her, his tone dropping. Of course, I do have one small, personal request. My family is hosting a gala next weekend. I'd like you to be there as my date. There was the real play. He was using this business deal to force her to submit to him personally. Beneath the table, Claire's hands clenched into fists. Ava sat beside him, sipping her coffee with a faint, knowing smirk, watching Claire's humiliation unfold. Her look said it all. This is what you get for rejecting him. You can act tough all you want, but in the end, you still have to bow to the money. The room was dead silent. I put my phone away and stood up. Every head in the room turned toward me. I walked to the water cooler, filled a cup, and carried it over to Claire, placing it gently by her hand. Here, I said softly. Don't waste your breath arguing with vultures. It's not worth it. My voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet room, it carried. Who the hell are you calling a vulture? Brandon shot to his feet, pointing a finger at my face. I ignored him, leaning down to speak in a voice only Claire could hear. Don't agree. The HOA fees are the homeowner's money, not the company's. If you touch that fund and something goes wrong later, you're the one who will get sued into oblivion. Claire flinched. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise. She never expected her loser husband to understand the first thing about contract law. I gave her a small smile before turning to face Brandon. Why so angry, Mr. Vance? I said calmly. I just think that a partnership should be based on mutual benefit. Your terms sound less like a partnership and more like a shakedown. If word got out, people might think Vance Development is going under and needs to resort to strong-arm tactics to stay afloat. Who the hell do you think you are? You don't get a say in this. Brandon's face was turning a blotchy red. I'm Claire's husband. Her business is my business. And whether I get a say or not isn't up to you. I picked up the contract from the table, glanced at it, and then dropped it back in front of him with a loud smack. We're not signing this. You want to play in your little sandbox? Go right ahead. Riverwood Estates will do just fine without you. I took Claire's hand. Honey, let's go home. She was still in a daze, but she let me pull her to her feet. Ethan, you stop right there. Brandon scrambled around the table to block our path. If you walk out that door today, I swear Claire's company will be bankrupt by morning. Is that so? I stopped and looked at him, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was a smile he had never seen before, calm, but backed by an authority that was absolute. You know, Brandon, you should really think before you speak. Sometimes, when you talk a big game, you end up biting your own tongue. I took out my phone and dialed a number right there in front of him. The call connected almost instantly. Hey, Arthur, it's me. That Riverwood Estates project in Austin. You know of it? Right. The commercial plot next door, Vance Development is running it. Give the City Planning Commission a call. Tell them there might be some irregularities with their zoning and environmental reviews. Suggest they start the whole process over. That's right. Let them take their time. A long, long time. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Brandon and Ava stared at me, dumbfounded. Mr. Wallace's jaw was on the floor. Who are you calling? Who do you think you are? Brandon's voice was a mix of bravado and fear. Just a delivery guy? Who could I possibly know? Probably just one of my buddies from DoorDash, I said with an innocent shrug. Brandon started to say something else, but his own phone buzzed. He answered it, and the color drained from his face. What? The permits were rejected? And the EPA is launching a new review? How is that possible? Dad, you have to call someone. He didn't finish. I could hear the shouting from the other end of the line. He stood there, clutching his phone, beads of sweat popping on his forehead as he stared at me in disbelief. He couldn't comprehend how a simple delivery driver could kill a multi-million-dollar project with a single phone call. The gap in his understanding was a canyon he couldn't cross. I didn't spare him another glance. I took Claire's hand. She was still in shock, and led her out of the conference room. Ava watched me go, her expression an unreadable mess. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. I think she was starting to wonder if I was really the nobody she remembered. Back in the car, Claire didn't speak for a long time. She just watched me, her cool gray eyes filled with an emotion I'd never seen there before. It was a mix of confusion, curiosity, and a sliver of suspicion. Who are you? She finally asked. Your husband, Ethan Hayes, I said, starting the car, my tone light. That phone call. Who is that? She pressed. Just a friend. What kind of friend has that kind of power? A friend who really believes in civic duty, I improvised. Claire obviously didn't buy it. She was silent for a moment, then said, Thank you for today. Don't mention it. We're married, right? I said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She didn't reply, just turned to look out the window. Her reflection showed a deep frown, her mind clearly racing. She never imagined that the useless husband she'd married had connections she couldn't even fathom. It unsettled her. She hated not being in control. I knew today was just the beginning. I had shattered the fragile peace between us and planted a seed of doubt in her mind. But I didn't care. A punk like Brandon Vance thought he could mess with my wife. I was more than happy to show him who he was really dealing with. When we got home, Sharon immediately launched into her usual tirade. "You back already? Did the deal go through? I told you he would just mess things up. Claire, you never listened to me." "Mom, I'm tired." Claire cut her off and walked straight to her room. I went into the kitchen to start dinner, just like any other day. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, the crisis at Claire's company exploded in a way I hadn't anticipated. Exclusive, Austin tech giant Sterling Innovations facing financial collapse, owes vendors over $3 million. Cash-strapped Sterling halts work on Riverwood Estates. Project may become ghost development. From Wonder Woman to broke, CEO Claire Sterling's empire crumbles. Overnight, the negative headlines were everywhere. The company's phones were ringing off the hook, bankers were showing up to collect on loans, and partners were scrambling to terminate their contracts. In a single night, Sterling Innovations was pushed to the edge of a cliff. I knew it was Brandon's revenge. He couldn't touch my friend, so he was unleashing all his fury on Claire. He was going to burn her to the ground until she came crawling to him for help. In the days that followed, Claire withered before my eyes. She left before dawn and came home long after dark, locking herself in her study to make endless phone calls. Her tone shifted from calm and professional to pleading and finally to despair. Even Sharon was panicking. She stopped yelling at me and spent her days sighing in the living room, secretly wiping away tears. One night, I got up for a glass of water and saw the light was still on in the study. The door was cracked open, and I could see Claire, her head buried in her arms on the desk, her shoulders shaking. She was crying. The woman who was always a fortress of ice, of unbreakable strength, was weeping alone in the dark. And in that moment, I felt something sharp twist in my chest. We were just a contract marriage, sure. But after 2 years, you develop feelings for a stray dog, let alone a person. And she was, for all intents and purposes, my wife. I couldn't just stand by and watch a snake like Brandon Vance destroy her. I went back to my room and pulled out a sleek, black phone I almost never used. I powered it on. The screen lit up with an ornate, golden family crest. I dialed a number. "Young master?" A respectful, older voice answered. "Arthur, it's me." "Sir, it is good to hear from you. Your grandfather has been asking." "Not now," I cut him off. "I need you to look into a company in Austin called Vance Development. And I want to acquire another company, Sterling Innovations." "No, not an acquisition. A capital injection. I want a controlling stake." "Sterling Innovations? The one rumored to be going bankrupt?" "Sir, the company's financials are. If your slice_ type is dialogue, you need to add a character. If you don't have a specific character, please use man, woman, old man / old woman. Don't ask questions. Just do it. Use an offshore account. I don't want anyone tracing it back to me. I want it done in 3 days." "Yes, sir." I hung up, deleted the call log, and turned the phone off. After that, I walked out of my room and knocked on the study door. The crying stopped. "Who is it?" Her voice was thick with emotion. "It's me, Ethan. I made you some pasta." The door opened. Claire stood there, her eyes red and swollen, tear tracks still wet on her cheeks. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of vulnerability and helplessness. She started to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I held out the bowl. "Eat something. Even if the world is ending, you should do it on a full stomach." She took the bowl, her head bowed. "Thank you," she whispered. Watching her stand there, taking small, hesitant bites of pasta, I made a decision. I was going to pay that severance package early, but I was going to do it my way. The next morning, while Claire was still asleep, I left the house as usual for my delivery shift. Only I didn't log into the app. Instead, I rode my scooter to the most impressive skyscraper in downtown Austin, the Global Capitol Tower. I parked out front, and a man in a sharp suit immediately walked out to greet me, bowing his head respectfully. "Mr. Hayes, our president is waiting for you on the top floor." I nodded and followed him inside. As we walked through the lobby, everyone stared. They were probably wondering why the general manager of Global Capital was personally escorting a guy in a DoorDash uniform. The man I was about to meet was the president of Global Capital's entire North American division, a man who could make or break markets with a single phone call. He was also a man I had personally promoted to that position 3 years ago. In the penthouse office, Massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Austin skyline. A man in his 50s with impeccably styled gray hair shot up from his leather chair the moment I walked in. He rushed over and grabbed my hand, his face beaming. "Boss, it's so good to finally see you." His name was David Coleman, and his reverence was palpable. 3 years ago, he'd been a struggling fund manager on Wall Street. I saw his talent and gave him the keys to the kingdom. "Have a seat, David," I said, pulling my hand away and walking to the window to look down at the city below. "Sir, what can I do for you?" David asked, standing behind me like an eager student. "Sterling Innovations. You know it. Of course. Local tech and development firm. On the verge of collapse. Their stock is in free fall. I want you to invest. 50 million, I said, holding up 5 fingers. David blinked. 50 million? Sir, with all due respect, that company isn't worth a tenth of that. It's a sinking ship. 50 million will just go straight to the bottom. I know, I said, turning to face him. I don't want to make a splash. I want to save the ship. And not just save it. I want to turn it into the biggest player in Texas. David looked confused, but he didn't question me. I understand, sir. I'll have my team draw up the papers. Is this an acquisition or a strategic investment? I said. I want 51% of the stock, but I will not be involved in operations, and I will not take a seat on the board. All decisions will remain with the current CEO, Claire Sterling. Now David was completely lost. Spend 50 million on a failing company, take a controlling interest, and then give up all control. It was the worst business deal he'd ever heard of, but he nodded without hesitation. Understood, sir. One other thing, you asked me to look into Vance Development, and a typical family-run operation. They cut corners, grease palms to get permits. Their entire liquidity is tied up in that commercial project next to Riverwood Estates. If that project dies, they go bankrupt. Good. A cold smile touched my lips. Then kill it. Consider it done. And David, I said, looking him straight in the eye, remember this. No one can ever know I'm involved. Global Capital is simply an investor that sees potential in Sterling Innovations. Understand? Perfectly, boss. You have my word. I left the Global Capital Tower, got back on my scooter, and merged back into traffic. It was as if the whole meeting had been a dream. At that exact moment, Claire Sterling was living through the darkest day of her life. The bank had delivered its final ultimatum. If she couldn't repay the $3 million loan within 3 days, they would begin foreclosure proceedings and seize all company and personal assets. Vendors were camped out in her lobby. Her employees were terrified, and resignation emails were flooding her inbox. She sat in her empty office, staring out at the city lights, and for the first time, felt true despair. Just give up. The thought crept in her mind, uninvited. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a number. Brandon Vance. Maybe if she begged him, there was still a chance. No. She threw the phone onto her desk. She was Claire Sterling. She would rather be bankrupt and homeless than ever bend her knee to a man like that. Just then, an email notification popped up on her computer. It was to her private account. The sender was anonymous. The subject line read, "An investment from an angel." Claire frowned and clicked it open. The message was short. Tomorrow morning at 10, in the penthouse of the Global Capital Tower, the president of North American Operations, Mr. David Coleman, would like to discuss a $50 million investment. Boom. It felt like a lightning bolt had struck her brain. Global Capital? David Coleman, the legendary titan of finance? Why would he want to invest in her tiny, failing company? And $50 million, it had to be a prank. That was her first thought. But at the bottom of the email was a digital invitation, complete with the official Global Capital seal and David Coleman's own electronic signature. It all looked terrifyingly real. Claire's heart began to pound. She had no idea who this anonymous angel was or why they were helping her. But this was her only lifeline. Trap or not, she had to take the chance. Her hands shaking, she picked up her phone and dialed my number. "Hey, everything okay?" I answered. I was at the grocery store trying to decide what to make for dinner. "Ethan, are you free tomorrow?" Her voice was trembling, though she tried to hide it. "Yeah, I'm free. What's up?" "Tomorrow, at 10 in the morning. Could you drive me somewhere again?" "Sure. Where to?" "The Global Capital Tower." I stood there, holding a bag of carrots, and smiled. "No problem. The next morning, I drove Claire's Porsche and dropped her off in front of the Global Capital Tower. She was clearly on edge. She wore a brand new suit and had spent time on her makeup, but her tightly clasped hands betrayed her anxiety. You could just wait for me down here, she said before getting out. Okay, I nodded. I knew she didn't want her loser husband anywhere near such an important meeting. I watched her walk into that glittering lobby, her back straight, looking like a soldier marching into a battle she knew she couldn't win. I didn't wait downstairs. I parked the car and took a private elevator to the top floor. David was waiting for me in his office. Boss, Ms. Sterling has arrived. She's in the guest conference room. Good. I walked over to the one-way glass that looked into the room. Claire was sitting alone on a leather sofa. Her posture perfect, but her nervousness was palpable. A moment later, David walked in. Ms. Sterling, a pleasure. I'm David Coleman. He extended his hand. Claire shot to her feet, shaking his hand as if she were meeting royalty. Mr. Coleman, it's an honor. Please sit. David gestured to the sofa and got straight to the point. Ms. Sterling, I assume you know why I've asked you here. Global Capital would like to invest $50 million into your company to support the completion of the Riverwood project and your future operations. Even though she was expecting it, hearing the number out loud still shocked her. 50 million, she stammered, unable to believe her ears. Yes, 50 million, David said with a polite smile. We have great faith in the potential of Sterling Innovations and in you, Ms. Sterling. But why? Claire asked the question that had been haunting her. You must be aware of my company's current situation. An investment like this is incredibly risky. Risk and reward go hand in hand, David replied smoothly. We trust our judgment. We do, however, have one condition. Claire's heart leaped in her throat. She knew there was no such thing as a free lunch. We require a 51% stake in your company. The color drained from Claire's face. 51%. That meant she would lose control. Everything she had worked so hard to build would belong to someone else. She fell silent. David seemed to read her mind. Please, don't be alarmed, Ms. Sterling. While we will be the majority shareholder, we have no intention of interfering in the day-to-day operations of the company. All decision-making power will remain in your hands. We are purely a financial partner. Claire stared at him, utterly bewildered. A deal like that. An investor who pays $50 million for a controlling stake but gives up all control? It was like winning the lottery. It made no sense. Why would any sane investor do that unless the investor's motives had nothing to do with business? She looked at the smiling man across from her, her mind racing with suspicion. She refused to believe that a shark like David Coleman was secretly a philanthropist. Mr. Coleman, forgive my bluntness, but I don't understand your motivation, Claire said, her voice steady. What is your goal here? David chuckled softly and delivered a line that would haunt her for a long time. Ms. Sterling, this wasn't my decision. He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. It was the decision of the man behind Global Capital. He said he admires you very much and wanted to give you a chance. The man behind. Claire was more confused than ever. Who is he? I'm sorry, but his identity is confidential, David said, shaking his head. I can only tell you that he is someone you would never, ever expect. In a conference room, Claire was lost in thought, and on the other side of the glass, I was sipping a cup of coffee, watching her. I knew that this puzzle would be a thorn in her side. She would search, she would investigate. She would suspect everyone around her, but she would never guess that the mysterious benefactor was the same useless husband who cooked her dinner every night. And that was exactly how I wanted it. That feeling of control, born from the gap between her reality and mine, was intoxicating. Half an hour later, Claire signed the contract. When she walked out of the Global Capital Tower, she was in a daze. It felt like a dream. Her company was saved. $50 million would be in her account by morning. The crisis was over. She pulled open the passenger door of the Porsche and slumped into the seat. I was leaning back, scrolling through TikToks on my phone, laughing at some stupid video. In that instant, she looked at me, and a profound sense of disconnect washed over her. On one side, the mysterious financial titan who held the fate of her company in his hands. On the other, her husband, a man living at the bottom of the social ladder, working for his next meal. Two completely different worlds, absurdly tangled together by a marriage contract. All done? I asked, turning off my phone. Yes, she nodded, her eyes lingering on me, a question she couldn't ask hanging in the air between us. Great. Let's go home. A deal this big calls for a celebration. I'll make my special bolognese tonight. Claire looked at my cheerful, oblivious smile, and the suspicion in her heart deepened. Could it really all be a coincidence? The moment the $50 million hit the account, Sterling Innovations was resurrected. The banks stopped calling, sending over account managers to discuss future partnerships instead. Vendors were suddenly friendly again, offering extended payment terms. The employees who had resigned sheepishly asked for their jobs back. Everyone at the company was euphoric, but for Claire, the mystery only grew larger. She pulled every string she had, trying to uncover the identity of the man behind Global Capital, but every trail went cold at David Coleman. The man's identity was a fortress. It made her uneasy. A nameless, faceless entity now controlled her company's destiny. It was a time bomb ticking away. At home, things had also shifted in strange ways. The biggest change was Sharon. When she heard about the $50 million investment, she was speechless. That night, she came into the kitchen while I was cooking, something she had never done before. Ethan, she began, wringing her hands, a smile plastered on her face that I'd never seen before. What's up, Sharon? I asked without looking up from the onions I was dicing. Well, now that Claire's company is doing so well. I was thinking you shouldn't have to keep doing that delivery job. It's so hard, all that time out in the sun. I had to stop myself from laughing. The wolf was trying to befriend the sheep. It's fine. I'm used to it. No, that's not right, she said, sidling up to me and lowering her voice conspiratorially. You're Claire's husband, which means you're part of the company. I told Claire she should give you a position, vice president or something. It will be good for your image. A VP? The audacity was almost impressive. Sharon, I don't know anything about her business. I'd just be in the way. Don't be silly. You're her husband. You should be there too. Keep an eye on things, she said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. Besides, if you're a VP, our family gets some respect. When I'm playing bridge with my friends, I can finally brag a little. So that was her real angle. Did Claire agree to this? I asked. Well, not yet. She said you don't have any experience, Sharon admitted, looking a bit awkward. That's why I came to you. You should go talk to her. Tell her you want to work at the company. You're her husband. She has to listen to you, right? I put down the knife and turned to face her. Sharon, I kind of like my job. It's flexible, and I don't have to deal with office politics. The smile froze on her face. What? What is that supposed to mean? I'm trying to help you, and you throw it back in my face? Let me tell you something, Ethan, don't think you're hot stuff just because the company got lucky. That money isn't yours. You're still just a freeloader living off my daughter. Her mood flipped like a switch. I didn't argue. I just picked up my knife and went back to dicing, the blade hitting the cutting board with a steady, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. My indifference seemed to enrage her even more. She was about to launch into another tirade when Claire walked out of her room. Mom, what is it now? What is it? Claire, you have to talk to him. I offer him a real job at your company out of the goodness of my heart, and he turns his nose up at it. He is a hopeless case. Claire looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to her mother. Stay out of the company's business, and what he does for a living is his own choice. She walked over to me and looked at the pot on the stove. What are you making? She asked softly. Steak and potatoes. Your favorite. Okay, she said, but instead of leaving, she just stood there beside me, watching me cook. Sharon stared at us, fuming, then stomped back to her room. We were alone in the kitchen. The steaks sizzled in the pan, filling the air with a rich aroma. So, any leads on the mysterious investor? I asked, trying to sound casual. Claire's body tensed. No, she said, shaking her head. Whoever it is, they've covered their tracks perfectly. Oh, I nodded. You think maybe it's a secret admirer? Some rich guy, spending a fortune just to get your attention. It's pretty romantic. Claire didn't answer. She just watched me, her gaze sharp and probing. Why would you think that? She asked. It's always like that in the movies, isn't it? I laughed. Well, one thing's for sure, it's not Brandon Vance. If he had that kind of power, he'd be holding it over your head, not hiding in the shadows. At the mention of Brandon's name, Claire's expression turned cold. Something happened with Vance Development, she said suddenly. Oh, what's that? I asked, feigning ignorance. Their commercial project was shut down indefinitely. Zoning violations, environmental concerns. The banks pulled their funding. Their cash flow is gone. I heard Brandon's father is losing his mind. Is that right? Well, that's just karma, I said, sliding a perfectly cooked steak onto a plate. You mess with the bull, you get the horns. Claire stared at me, her eyes narrowing. She didn't believe in coincidences. The timing of Vance Development's collapse, the day after Global Capital's investment, was too perfect. A wild, absurd theory began to form in her mind. Could Ethan be connected to this? No, that's impossible. She immediately dismissed the thought. He was just a delivery driver. How could he possibly influence a giant like Global Capital or bring down a company like Vance Development? She had to be losing her mind from stress. A week later, the Austin Chamber of Commerce held its annual gala. Anyone who was anyone in the city was there. As the city's newest business phenom, Claire was, of course, invited. She didn't want to go, but Sharon insisted. Now that the company was thriving, she said Claire needed to be seen to show everyone just how successful the Sterling family had become. And Sharon had one more condition. I had to go with her. You're Claire's husband. You have to be at these things. You need to show everyone that my daughter is spoken for, and that her husband can hold his own in high society. As she said this, she pushed me into the bedroom and threw a brand new tuxedo at me. Get changed. And for God's sake, lose that red jacket. It's embarrassing. I looked at the expensive tux and sighed. Claire stood by, not saying a word. She probably wanted to use this as another opportunity to test me. I put on the suit. It fit perfectly. I had to admit, the man in the mirror looked almost respectable. Sharon's eyes went wide. She walked around me, clicking her tongue. Well, I guess even a bum can look like a prince if you dress him up right. Thanks, Sharon. That evening, I drove us to the hotel where the gala was being held. The moment we stepped out of the car, Sharon was starstruck. The valet line was a parade of Lamborghinis and Bentleys. The guests were all faces from the news and society pages. She clung to Claire's arm like a proud peacock, while whispering instructions to me. Ethan, when we get inside, don't talk. Just eat, and try not to embarrass us. I nodded and followed them in. As soon as we entered the ballroom, Claire became the center of attention. Isn't that Claire Sterling? I heard she landed a $50 million investment from Global Capital. What a powerhouse. Yeah, and I heard Brandon Vance try to screw her over and ended up destroying his own company instead. Serves him right. Listening to the chatter, Sharon stood even taller. A stream of people came over to congratulate Claire, to network, to kiss the ring. She handled them all with effortless grace, once again the confident queen of her domain. I found a quiet corner, grabbed a plate of hors d'oeuvres, and focused on the food. But of course, trouble found me anyway. Brandon Vance and his father, the CEO of Vance Development, came storming toward us, their faces dark with fury. Trailing behind them was a pale and haggard-looking Ava, Claire Sterling. Brandon's eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a cornered animal. It was you, wasn't it? You went crying to Global Capital and had them ruin us. His shout drew the attention of everyone nearby. Claire frowned. Brandon, please. Your company's problems have nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with you? How could it be nothing to do with you? One day you get a massive investment. The next day my family is ruined. What are the odds of that? His father snarled. He's right. Ava chimed in, pointing a trembling finger first at Claire, then at me. It was you two. I can't believe you're this kind of person, Claire. You'd ruin a family just for revenge. And you, she glared at me, you pathetic coward, hiding behind a woman and pulling strings in the dark. What kind of man are you? I put down my mini quiche and wiped my mouth with a napkin. It seemed my last lesson hadn't been clear enough. I was about to respond when a figure hurried in from the entrance and made a beeline for our group. It was David Coleman. His arrival silenced the room. Everyone knew who he was. He was the real power in the room tonight. The elder Vance saw him and lunged forward as if he were a drowning man spotting a life raft. Mr. Coleman, sir, please let me explain. There's been a terrible misunderstanding with our project. Please, just give us another chance. David Coleman walked past him without a single glance. The Vances and everyone else froze. because David Coleman had stopped directly in front of me. Then, under the shocked gaze of the entire room, he bowed deeply to me, the loser in the borrowed tuxedo. "Boss," he said, his voice clear and respectful. Boom. A nuclear bomb had just gone off in the ballroom. Everyone was stunned into silence. Brandon, Ava, and his father looked like they had seen a ghost. Sharon's jaw dropped. The champagne flute in her hand slipped, shattering on the marble floor. And Claire. She stood there, frozen. Her cool, gray eyes, usually so calm, were now a swirling tempest of emotion. She stared at me, then at David, desperately searching for some sign that this was all just an elaborate joke. But there was none. David Coleman's respect was genuine. My calm was too. In that one moment, every puzzle piece clicked into place. The mysterious investor. The $50 million angel. The unseen hand that had crushed Vance Development. It was him, her husband of 2 years. The man she had looked down on, pitted, and dismissed as a failure. The revelation was so immense, so reality-shattering, that her heart could barely take it. "Be boss." Brandon's voice trembled. He pointed a shaking finger from me to David. "Mr. Coleman, you must have the wrong person. He's just a DoorDash driver." David slowly straightened up and turned to look at Brandon with an expression of pure pity. "A delivery driver?" he said with a cold laugh. "Mr. Hayes was simply experiencing life. You, on the other hand, Mr. Vance, might be interested to know that due to your foolishness, our traders on the international market have just finished shorting your company's stock into oblivion. It is now, for all intents and purposes, worthless." "What?" The elder Vance's eyes rolled back in his head, and he staggered. "Furthermore," David added, glancing at Ava, "this young lady just referred to my boss as a pathetic coward." An interesting choice of words. "As of tomorrow morning, you will find that no company in this city or this country will be willing to hire you. You have my word on that." The blood drained from Ava's face. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying mix of regret and awe. She finally understood. She hadn't just missed out on some college crush. She had missed out on an entire world. "No, it can't be," she whispered, swaying on her feet. David ignored them, turning back to Claire with another respectful bow. "Ms. Sterling, my apologies for the deception. My boss's privacy is of the utmost importance. I hope you can understand." Claire didn't respond. She just stared at me, her gaze a chaotic storm of shock, anger, humiliation, and confusion. She felt like the punchline to a cosmic joke. All this time, she thought she was the one in control, the one offering charity. She thought she had given Ethan Hayes a place to live, a menial existence. But it was she who had been protected, she who had been rescued. And for 2 years, she had rewarded her savior with nothing but contempt and indifference. Sharon finally snapped out her shock. She looked at me, her lips trembling, unable to form a single word. She remembered every insult she had ever hurled at me. Useless, freeloader, deadbeat. The man she had been berating for 2 years was the secret power behind global capital. A man who could save her daughter's company with a flick of his wrist and destroy another with a single phone call. A deep, bone-chilling cold washed over her. I didn't look at any of them. I walked to Claire, took off my tuxedo jacket, and draped it over her trembling shoulders. "Let's go home," I said, my voice soft. Claire didn't move. She looked up, meeting my eyes, and asked one word, each syllable dripping with ice. "Why?" I knew what she was asking. Why me? Why play this cruel, elaborate game with her? "Because," I said, holding her gaze, 3 years ago, I needed a place to disappear. And you needed a husband to get your family off your back. It was a simple arrangement. I never meant for it to be a game." "Disappear?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Mr. Hayes, you have a very unique way of disappearing. Was it fun, watching us all run around like fools while you pulled the strings? Did it make you feel powerful?" Her voice was laced with sarcasm and a pain so deep it was almost physical. I knew, in that moment, that revealing my identity hadn't brought us closer. It had built a wall between us a mile high. "I'm tired. Can we please talk about this at home?" I reached for her hand. She recoiled as if my touch were electric, taking a sharp step back. That small movement hurt more than any word she could have said. Don't touch me, she said, her eyes like chips of ice. Ethan, I think you're disgusting. Then she turned, pushed her way through the stunned crowd, and ran out of the ballroom without looking back. I stood there, my hands still outstretched, frozen in the empty space between us. In my chest, I felt a dull, aching pain. It turns out that when you finally drop the mask and show someone your true face, they don't always like what they see. Sometimes they just want to stomp on it. It was late when I got home. The lights in the living room were all on. Claire was sitting on the sofa. Sharon and Bob were opposite her. The three of them sat in a tense, suffocating silence. The moment I walked in, Sharon scrambled to her feet and did something I never expected. She dropped to her knees in front of me. Mr. Hayes, sir, I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was a fool. Please, you're a big man. You can't hold a grudge against a stupid, old woman like me. She clung to my leg, sobbing hysterically. Bob stood up, wringing his hands, his face a mask of anxiety. Ethan, son, Sharon, she has a sharp tongue, but she doesn't mean it. Don't take it to heart. The whole scene was so absurd, I just felt tired. I ignored them and looked at Claire. Tell her to get up, I said quietly. Claire looked up, her eyes still cold. Mom, get up. I won't. Not until Mr. Hayes forgives me. I said get up. Claire's voice suddenly cracked with a raw, hysterical edge. Startled, Sharon scrambled to her feet and scurried behind Bob, finally silent. We need to talk, Claire said, standing. Okay. She led the way to her study. When the door closed behind us, it felt like it sealed off the rest of the world. So, talk, she said, her back to me as she stood by the window. I want the whole story. He sighed and sat down. My name is Ethan Hayes. My family is from New York. My grandfather founded Hayes Industries. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother remarried soon after. That makes me the sole heir. 3 years ago, my grandfather's health started failing. My uncles began a vicious fight for control of the company. It was ugly. They tried to force me into a marriage with a woman I'd never met to consolidate their power through a corporate merger. I was sick of it, all of it. So I made a deal with my grandfather. I would leave for 3 years. I would live on my own, without any family resources. If I could survive, I would come back and take over. If I couldn't, then the Hayes fortune was no longer my problem. So I created a new identity, came to Austin, and I met you. I laid it all out, holding nothing back. When I finished, the study was silent. The only sound was the soft whisper of our breathing. After a long time, Claire finally turned around. The anger was gone from her face, replaced by a deep, hollow exhaustion. So you've been laughing at me this whole time, haven't you? She asked, her voice flat. Laughing at the stupid little girl stressing over a $3 million loan. Laughing at me being cornered by Brandon Vance. Laughing while your mother called you a loser to your face, all the while you were secretly mocking us for our ignorance. It must have felt good, didn't it? Being so in control. No. I stood and walked toward her. I was never laughing at you. I just want a quiet life. I never intended to get involved in your world. If Brandon hadn't pushed things too far, if you hadn't, I stopped. If I hadn't what? She pressed. If I hadn't seen you crying alone in here that night, I admitted, I probably would have just let it all happen, waited for the contract to end, and walked away. Her whole body trembled, a violent, uncontrollable shudder. She never imagined that was the reason. So you helped me. Out of pity. Her voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't pity, I said, looking her straight in the eye. It was because you're my wife. I know it's just a contract, but after 2 years, I got used to you. I got used to cooking for you. I got used to your cold shoulder and the rare moments when you let your guard down. I didn't want to see anyone hurt you. It was the honest truth. I thought my honesty might earn me some understanding. Instead, she just gave a sad, bitter smile. Wife, she repeated the word, as if mocking herself. Ethan, have you forgotten? Our marriage was a transaction. You paid me for service. Well, you paid your bill in full now. $50 million should cover it. She pulled open a desk drawer and took out the marriage contract we had signed. Then, right in front of me, she tore it in half. The contract is terminated, she said, dropping the pieces on the desk. You can go now. I'll have the $50,000 from our original agreement wired to your account. My heart sank. I never thought she would be this final, this absolute. Claire, my voice was hoarse. Do you really have to do this? What else is there to do? She shot back. Continue playing house? Ethan, we are not from the same world. You live on a mountain I have no desire to climb. Let me go, and let yourself go too. Her words were a knife, twisted in the one place I was most vulnerable. She was right. We weren't from the same world. I thought by stepping down, I could meet her in hers. I forgot that the chasm between us was always there, and maybe it was too wide to ever cross. I didn't leave. I moved into the guest room. Claire didn't kick me out, and Sharon and Bob wouldn't have dared. They treated me like a visiting god now, serving me the best food and speaking to me in hushed, respectful tones. The atmosphere in the house was bizarre. Claire and I were in a Cold War. We lived under the same roof, but we were more distant than ever. She left early and came home late, deliberately avoiding me. On the rare occasions we were at the dinner table at the same time, we ate in silence. I knew she was trying to force me out, but I couldn't leave. Arthur had called with a new piece of information. My dear uncles in New York had found out where I was, and they knew about Claire. They were sending people. Their goal was simple: drag me back to New York and force the marriage. And if I resisted, they wouldn't hesitate to use leverage to make Claire Sterling disappear. I couldn't let her get hurt because of me. That night, I was reading in the guest room when there was a soft knock on the door. It was Claire. She was wearing pajamas, holding a glass of milk. "You're still up?" She placed a glass on my nightstand. It was the first time she had spoken to me voluntarily since the gala. "Can't sleep," I said, closing my book. She hesitated. I heard Advanced Development officially filed for bankruptcy. Brandon's father jumped from his office window. He didn't make it, and Brandon had a complete breakdown. "I know," I said. It wasn't a surprise. They had made their bed. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked. "Yes." I didn't deny it. She was silent for a long moment. "Ethan, you should go," she finally said. "Leave Austin. Go back to your world. Let's just end this." "I can't," I said, looking at her. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because if I leave now, you'll be in danger." I told her what Arthur had discovered about my uncles. Claire's face went white. She had never imagined my world was more than just corporate takeovers. It was darker, more dangerous. It wasn't just business, it was life and death. "So," she said, her expression softening, "you're staying? To protect me?" "Yes," I nodded. "I started this mess. I'll finish it. Once everything is taken care of, I'll leave. I won't bother you again." Claire looked at me. Her lips parted as if to say something, but she didn't. She just turned and quietly left the room. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. Well, nephew. Long time no see." The voice was smooth and cold. It was my uncle, Marcus Hayes, a snake who would do anything for power. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Can an uncle just call to say hello? I hear you found yourself a pretty little wife in Austin. Aren't you going to introduce us?" "She's not my wife anymore." "Oh, I don't think that's for you to decide," he chuckled. "I'm giving you 3 days to get your ass back to New York. If you don't, I can't guarantee that your pretty little ex-wife won't have some kind of accident. You know, faulty brakes, a slip in the shower. Things happen." It was a direct threat. "You touch her, and I will kill you," I said, my voice low and deadly. "Let's see if you get the chance," he said, and hung up. I squeezed the phone, the veins on the back of my hand standing out. They were serious. I had to end this now. I immediately called Arthur. I told him to take all the dirt he had been collecting on my uncles for years, the fraud, the money laundering, the backroom deals, and leak it all anonymously to the SEC and the New York Times. It was time to burn their house down. Then I want to find Claire. For the next few days, don't go anywhere. Stay home. I handed her a black credit card. "This has a $100 million credit line. The PIN is your birthday. If something happens to me, you take your parents and you go somewhere they can never find you, and you live a good life." Claire didn't take the card. She just looked at me, her eyes glistening. "Ethan, what are you going to do?" "I'm not going on an adventure." I tried to smile. "I'm going to end a family feud." "I'm going with you," she said suddenly. I stared at her. "What?" I said, "I'm going with you." She repeated, her eyes filled with a fierce determination I had never seen before. "You are my husband. Your fight is my fight. I don't care about what happened before. From this moment on, we face it together." Looking at her, my heart, which I thought had turned to stone, felt a sudden, overwhelming warmth. It turns out even glaciers can melt. In the end, I didn't let her come with me. This was my war, and I wouldn't let her become a casualty. I went alone to the location Marcus had given me, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Inside, Marcus was waiting with a dozen of his men. "Nephew, so glad you could make it. For a minute there, I thought you were actually willing to die for that woman," he said, smirking from a chair. "Where is she?" I demanded. "Patience." He clapped his hands. Two of his goons dragged a person forward. Their hands were tied, their mouth gagged. But it wasn't Claire. It was Ava. I froze. What the hell were they doing with Ava? She saw me and began to struggle wildly, her eyes wide with terror. Surprised? Marcus laughed. "I did my research. This woman was your college sweetheart, the one that got away. I figured she would make for excellent leverage as well." I looked at his smug, idiotic face, and I almost laughed. "Uncle, are you sure about that?" I said. "She and I are ancient history. If you think she's my weakness, you've seriously overestimated her importance." At my words, Ava stopped struggling, staring at me in disbelief. Marcus's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't care if she lives or dies," I said with a shrug. "If killing her makes you happy, go for it. Don't let me stop you." I turned to leave. "Stop!" Marcus yelled, panicked. He hadn't expected me to call his bluff. Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder and louder. Red and blue lights flashed outside, surrounding the warehouse. The color drained from Marcus's face. You call the cops." "Nope," I shook my head. But someone reported a group of armed men trespassing on private property. At that moment, Marcus's phone rang. He answered it, and as he listened, his whole body seemed to deflate. He collapsed back into his chair. "It's over. It's all over." Arthur had worked fast. The evidence of my uncle's crimes was now in the hands of the federal government. The Hayes family was about to be front-page news for all the wrong reasons. The dynasty was about to fall. The police burst in, tackling Marcus and his men to the ground. In the chaos, I walked out of the warehouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight. Parked just beyond the police cordon was a white Porsche. Claire was leaning against it, watching me. The moment she saw me, she ran, throwing her arms around me and holding on tight. "You're okay. Thank God you're okay." She sobbed into my shoulder. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her body, the frantic beating of her heart against mine. The weight I had been carrying for 3 years finally lifted. "It's over," I whispered. "I know." We stood there for a long time, just holding each other. Finally, she pulled back and looked up at me. "Ethan, what are you going to do now?" "Go back to New York," I said. "Clean up the mess. And then I'll come back for you." The words hung in the air, unsaid. I wanted the choice to be hers. "Do you still have that contract I tore up?" she asked. "No." "Good," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Then we'll have to write a new one." I looked into her eyes. This time, no expiration date. No conditions. Just you and me. "Are you okay with that?" Claire didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her gaze soft and full of a light I had never seen before. Then she smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen her truly smile. It was like watching a sunrise after a long, dark night. "Okay," she said. 1 year later, I was in my office at the new Hayes Industries headquarters in New York, signing off on a quarterly report, when a little boy with a mop of dark hair toddled in and hugged my leg. "Daddy uppies." I laughed and lifted him onto my lap. "Hey, Liam, where's Mommy?" "Mommy's fighting with the sad lady," he said in his squeaky toddler voice. I frowned, picked him up, and walked out of my office. Down the hall, Claire was standing with Liam on her hip. Across from her was a woman who was dramatically dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Ethan, I can't believe you really. It was Ava. Somehow, she found out I was back in New York and had managed to get past security." Claire shifted Liam to her other hip, looked Ava up and down with an icy calm, and delivered a line that would become legendary in company lore. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice dangerously sweet. "My husband isn't interested in secondhand goods, and trying to poach another woman's husband is a bad look. A very bad look. You should go." And with that, she turned, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and walked away like the queen she was. I watched her go, a huge, goofy grin spreading across my face. My wife was getting cuter every day, and